Hello, David Clarke here from DVC Training, and in this video I'm going to look at what was new in EDIUS 11.1 that came out in February 2024. So there's a nice change into the bin, and there's something which is really big, which is that EDIUS can now use nVidia graphics cards to help playback footage. You've been able to do this in things like Premiere and Resolve for ages. EDIUS has always stuck to using QuickSync. Well, now it can also use nVidia. This is great for anybody that doesn't have a processor with QuickSync. And even if you have got QuickSync, it's also great because now you've got two ways of helping to play back stuff. There's QuickSync and there is nVidia. Now, the first thing I'm going to look at is some of the small changes, and then I'm going to get on to the graphics card stuff. So as you probably know, with the EDIUS 11, Grass Valley changed the bin, and they didn't put some stuff back in that was there in the first place. And one of the things that I really missed is the fact that when you stick a clip onto the timeline, there's no indication in the bin as to whether it's actually used. Well, if I go to these particular clips, which happen to be here, now you can see the green dot that we had in previous versions is back. So now I can tell here that these are the 3 clips that I've actually used. If you go into different modes, you can see the green dots there. And if you go into the list view, there is now a column called Timeline Reference, which I just popped up here and ticked it, and now you can tell whether a clip is used on the timeline or not. In previous versions, this would say how many times it's used, and it doesn't do that. I don't know if they're going to change it, but right now it just shows you a tick or a not tick. So that's great. That's a nice addition into the program. The only view here which doesn't show whether you've actually used a clip is this one, where you just have an icon. There's no indication on that, but there are in all the other views. There are still some things I'd like them to put back into the bin. I'd like it to be a bit quicker at loading stuff up. I'd like to have the ability to delete files that we used to have in old versions. And I'd like to be able to do things like change the name of a clip or the tape name just by clicking in the bin here. So for example, if I want to change that clip name, I've actually got to go either to the properties of the clip, or I've got to open up this bit over here, untick, and then rename it there. Yeah, I'd like the ability to come in here and sort of select a whole bunch of clips and change the tape name in the bin just like we used to. Things are being improved. Hasn't quite got everything back in there yet, but it is getting better. But hey, at least we've got that back, the timeline reference. Now there's a whole bunch of other bug fixes, but like I said, the other major feature is now the ability to accelerate playback using an nVidia card. With EDIUS 10, they added the ability to encode into certain formats using an nVidia card, but it didn't help the playback. Well, it's been asked for ages, and now it's finally inside of EDIUS. And it does work really well. So for example here, I've just got 3 random clips on the timeline. These are actually made up in 4K, 50p, 10-bit. So they're 4K, 50p, 10-bit files, and they're in a 4K, 50p project. They're also saved in H.265. HEVC also means H.265, which is, traditionally very hard to play back. So let's have a quick bash at playing these things back. So if I start here and start playing, yep, buffer's climbing nicely. Quite happy doing that. Pops onto the second clip. Yep, still quite happy with that. So we're now doing 2 10-bit 4K H.265 clips. You get to the third one, it struggles and it can't quite cope with it. Actually, that buffer's going to go down to nothing. So it can now do 2 layers on my system, where previously it might have struggled to just do anything at all. Now my system has got one of the latest processors, a 14th generation processor. It's got 32 gig of RAM, and it's also got an nVidia card, an nVidia 3060, which is a fairly up-to-date graphics card, cost you about 270 quid. And like I said, EDIUS is using that card to do a lot of the work. And I particularly noticed that it's actually helped me a lot on some of my older systems. So for example, I've got a laptop with a 1060 in it and an i5 processor. And suddenly on that, I can play stuff back that I couldn't play back properly before, all due to the fact that it's now supporting nVidia. Now, as you'll notice, this system also has an Intel graphics card in it, because this processor has got graphics built into it. It's always been able to use this one to help play stuff back, and it's using the nVidia. How does it decide which one you use? So if I go up to settings and then system, we've got the usual stuff under importer and exporter, this use hardware decoder here under AVC HD, which governs whether you're using the hardware for playing back of H.264, and this use hardware here, which is under HEVC. These are the ones we've had there for ages. These ones basically turn it on and off. So if I turn that off, it won't use the hardware to play back H.264 at all. And if I turn that one off, it won't use the hardware to play back H.265. So let's see what happens if I do that. Pop Task Manager back up again, start it playing. And you'll notice here, actually, pretty much all of it is coming on the processor. So the CPU at the top here is being used an awful lot, as opposed to the nVidia, which is down here. You still got something going on the nVidia, but it's pretty much all going on the CPU. And you probably noticed there, it couldn't manage to do 2 layers. And then you get to the 3rd layer, and obviously it dies completely. I mean, that is actually still very good. Let's have a look at how this plays back on the laptop I mentioned. Quite an old laptop. It's got an i5 processor in it, and it's got an nVidia 1060 in it. It's also so old that it can't take Windows 11. This, I thought, got a new lease of life just by getting this extra support, because it's got a fairly decent graphics card in it. So let's see how this plays back my 10-bit H.265. There we are. Yep, it's managing to play back one stream quite happily. Obviously, buffer's dropping, can't quite do 2 and certainly won't do 3. So obviously not as good as my now up-to-date 14th gen system. But look what happens when I turn off the nVidia playback. So I'm just going to untick these 2, start it playing, and yep, it can't even manage to play back 1 layer of this stuff. Now bear in mind, this is a pretty old system. Yep. It really can't play that back for toffee. And in fact, my whole machine's become a bit sticky now. That's not good. Could be slightly related to the fact that I'm recording at the same time, but still, yeah, that's become pretty awful. It's an awful lot nicer if I have that hardware on. Tick them again, and suddenly it becomes nicer and slicker. I can start scrubbing over some of these things. Even if I can't play them back, I can scrub over them. Again, it's 50p 4K in a 50p 4K project. So I'm going to delve into the settings now. Now you might glaze over because it can get quite complicated. It gets complicated not because of EDIUS, but because of computers. The problem is that there are loads of different graphics cards and loads of different processors, and they have loads of different abilities. It also gets complicated because now I've got 3 possible ways of playing back this footage. So I can use the processor, I can use the Intel graphics card, and I can use the nVidia graphics card. Obviously you need a processor that's got an Intel graphics card to use the Intel graphics card. If you don't, if you're using a Xeon or an AMD, then you'll only have either the processor or the nVidia, so it'll be simpler. But imagine you have got an Intel processor with an Intel graphics card, and you've also got an nVidia graphics card. It's got 3 options in there, and there may be sometimes when it's actually good to use the Intel because the nVidia doesn't support the kind of stuff that you want to play back. So this is where it's going to get complicated, and I'll try and explain that a bit more in detail by looking through these settings. Hopefully your eyes won't glaze over. I mean, you could just ignore this, shove it on your machine, start playing stuff and see what happens. And you'll probably find out it works better. It could be as simple as that. But it's nice to try and understand some of the stuff that's going on in the background. I got a lot of this information from Steve from Grass Valley, who some of you will know from the Grass Valley forums. There will hopefully be more information coming out from Grass Valley in due course, and they'll hopefully develop this, so there'll be more stuff coming along. So if more information comes out that contradicts what I'm about to say, I'll do another video and update it later on. This is my understanding of how things work so far. What about choosing whether it uses the Intel card or the nVidia card? And what happens with different types of nVidia cards? So first of all, I'm going to turn these things back on. I'm turning these on and then applying and then playing stuff back. You really should make a change and then restart EDIUS just to be sure it's kicked in. These are all settings under hardware, where we have a new setting here, video rendering and playback. Woohoo! And here you can see you've got use GPU, and you've also got use Intel or use nVidia. So how do all these settings actually relate to each other? This setting turns off the hardware decoder completely. If you turn that off, it won't use either of them. This setting tells the computer which one to prefer to use back. So I'm telling it, try using the nVidia to play the stuff back. Depending on your graphics card, you might find out your graphics card doesn't actually accelerate your particular format of H.264 or H.265. Obviously, I'm using a fairly up-to-date graphics card, but there are loads of them, and they keep updating them all the time, and they do change what they can actually play back. If you go to the nVidia site, you can go to this page, and I'll put a link to that in the description for the YouTube channel. But it shows you here what nVidia cards can decode, so that's playback, and what they can encode. So on the decoding side, this is a list of a whole bunch of different graphics cards and what they can play back. Annoyingly, it doesn't quite fit on screen. So if I can make it a bit smaller, doesn't help whatsoever. So annoyingly, the entire table doesn't fit on screen and the headings disappear off the page when you start scrolling down, because it starts with the really old ones at the top and gets to the good ones at the bottom. So the ones I've been showing off here are either a 1060, which is in a laptop, or a 3060. I do also have a 2080 Super, but you see there's loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of these things. What can these things decode? Well, look, see, a 3060, if I look at this, it's got yes, 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 yes. Scroll down to the bottom so I can go to the end of the table, go back to the 3060, which I now can't see, but yes, yes, yes. It says yes for everything. It can basically play back all this kind of stuff. So it's lots of variations of H.265. Are these 420 variations it can do, and that's what I was trying to play back. But the yes means it can do all these formats. So at no point when I was telling my computer use the nVidia to play back did it come across a format it couldn't play back. But if I go to my 1060, it's got some no's. It's got some no's in those. I'll have to scroll back up to the top to find out what they are, and then I'll have to scroll across. I mean, it's a ridiculous table. It's as clear as mud. But what it does say is that modern graphics cards probably support most things. Older graphics cards will support less. And you might find out you're trying to play back a format that it can't play back. So what happens then? Because some of those formats might be supported by your QuickSync card. What a QuickSync card can support will vary depending on your processor. But again, I've got the latest kind of processor. It's going to support the latest kind of formats. So I might actually have a system where my graphics card can't play it back, but my QuickSync can. That's what this does. Now, as I understand it, as a default, if you set nVidia and it comes across a format the nVidia doesn't support, it will automatically then jump back to using QuickSync. If you set QuickSync, then it will use the QuickSync. So this is setting QuickSync. Selecting the Intel graphics card sets the QuickSync playback going. If you select the Intel graphics card, it will use the Intel graphics card for everything in preference, then jump back to the nVidia if there's something the Intel doesn't support. Now, of course, I've got the latest Intel. You might not have that. You might have an 8th generation or a 9th generation processor which doesn't support some of the formats the Intel does, but maybe you've put a fancy new nVidia in there that does. Well, if you set that, it would play it on the Intel, but if the Intel didn't support it and your nVidia did, it would then jump to the Intel. This doesn't make it not use one or the other. So if you set that, it might use the QuickSync graphics card at some point. Now, why is that important? In an ideal world, you just leave it at the defaults, play stuff, and it all works. But these are computers we're talking about. They're not ideal. Sometimes things go wrong. In particular, with QuickSync, we've had a problem with the latest generation processors. So since the 11th generation, I've generally been turning the QuickSync playback assist off because it's caused crashing. And it doesn't cause crashing on every single format. It only causes crashing on some formats. Or it's a bit sticky. Like when I'm doing these tutorials. Now, these tutorials are filmed using OBS. They're encoded using nVidia encoding in OBS. Then I go and edit them in EDIUS. And I find with the QuickSync playback assist on in EDIUS, they're a bit sticky. There's something peculiar going on there. It happens from time to time. It could be to do with the drivers. You might just need to update the drivers. It could be a problem at the Grass Valley end. You never know. But this is why knowing this is important, because if you set that and you say, well, I'm using the nVidia, but it's being sticky like it is when QuickSync is on, why on earth is it going wrong? It's because it might be defaulting to using the QuickSync, and maybe QuickSync isn't working with your processor, or you need to update graphics card or some other things. If anybody's ever fiddled with QuickSync playback on systems, they'll know that there can be problems. So that's why it's important to know this. If you select that, it might use the QuickSync. In my own test, my preference would be if I've got a decent up-to-date graphics card, choose that here, leave these things on, and then only fiddle if I've got a problem. I wouldn't set the Intel as the default. So if I set Intel here, click OK. Let's bring up the task manager again, press play. And yeah, you see it's still happily playing the stuff. You'll notice it's starting to use the Intel. It's still using my nVidia a bit. So again, we've gone up to 68%. So it's obviously using the Intel graphics card there. It is still using my nVidia a bit. Why is that? Actually, that's because I am recording this using OBS Studio, which is actually using the nVidia to do the encoding for the stuff I'm recording. So that 36% is actually my recording going as opposed to that. But what this is proving this, having set it on Intel, I'm now using the Intel card in preference over the nVidia. Now, if you are having problems with your particular formats and you think it's all down to QuickSync, the thing to do will be go to Importer, turn these things off, and then start playing, and you suddenly find everything's working nicely. Well, then it's going to be a problem using the hardware. The hardware is either going to be the QuickSync or the nVidia. The thing is, if you come in here and set nVidia, still doesn't mean it's not using QuickSync. If you want it to not use QuickSync, what you actually have to do is come into your system settings, go to display adapters, and actually disable that completely, which I'm not going to do right now because I'm in the middle of recording stuff. I'd do that with EDIUS off, and then I would restart the computer. And you might say, well, why on earth did they bother to do that, David? Why didn't they say that only uses Intel and that only uses nVidia? It's actually because, assuming the system's working properly, it's actually good to be able to fall back on using Intel if the nVidia doesn't work. If everybody was out there using the best graphics card you can get with the best processor you get all the time, it would be simple, just use nVidia. But they're not. There are loads of people using systems they've had for years, and there's lots of different abilities. So you really want it to be able to use the Intel if the nVidia can't cope with it. So it's nice the way that it does it. It's nice the way that it automatically falls back, and you've got a preference saying, yeah, use that one, but if not, go back to the other one. The only downside is that if you're having problems, where do you start looking? So I think it's very clever the way that they've actually programmed it. According to the release notes, the acceleration also accelerates some filters. So currently it's the primary color corrector, monotone and median, but hopefully they'll expand those in the future. Also, all this time I've only been talking about using nVidia cards. What about ATI? It does say it supports ATI, but I don't have any experience with them because I long ago gave up using ATI cards, simply because pretty much everybody that makes video stuff wants NVIDIAs. I use DaVinci Resolve, uses NVIDIA's better than it uses ATI cards. Same with Premiere. Same with things like I use a program called Blender, which is a free 3D program to do a lot of 3D stuff. Well, basically that works better with NVIDIA cards than with ATI. So I basically stick to NVIDIA cards. Sorry, AMD, I'm not going to use ATI cards. It does use it, but I don't know how well it performs. Definitely, if you're going to get a new card, I would say get an NVIDIA. Obviously, if you want to upgrade your system or you want a new system, then get in touch. I've been making systems for people in England and shipping them around the country. So if you're interested on that, get in touch. But mainly, this is a great new thing to put into EDIUS. It's breathed some more life into my old laptop, which has got a fairly decent graphics card. It means I can do more with my desktop. And it is something that we have been waiting for ages. And I do hope they expand on it and put more effects into it so I can get more out of it. One other thing to bear in mind with the EDIUS 11.1 is that, as it says on the release notes, you need to get an updated version of VizTitle. Obviously, you can get it from here. Just go to the link on the forums. I can put that into the notes below, and you can just get the update to VizTitle Express, and it'll put it on there. Or if you're using the EDIUS Setup Manager, it will do it for you. There is also something on here about bin thumbnails. So it says here, if your bin thumbnails aren't displaying properly after this update, we recommend you delete something here. So again, if your bin thumbnails don't display properly, pop onto this thread and do what it says. You've also got links here to that page with the rather annoying to decipher table, and also a similar thing for Intel, telling you what kind of different graphics cards, like my Intel UHD 770 can decode all these things, whereas my 9th generation can only decode these, so it's a lot less stuff. Like I say, the abilities do vary depending on the graphics card and your processor. So again, links to those are there. I'll put links to those in my description as well. So anyway, I hope you found that information useful, and also that the whole stuff about how the hardware works wasn't too confusing. I tried to keep it as simple as possible. Up and coming, Topaz is actually about to produce an OFX plugin. No idea if it's going to work in EDIUS with its new OFX bridge. I shall certainly try it and report back, because it would be nice to use those clips on the timeline. If you've got any questions, obviously you can email me, david@dvctraining.co.uk, or visit the website, www.dvctraining.co.uk. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.